let's jump right into the actual discussion, which is hacking zero trust. How does one begin thinking about a zero trust architecture?
You basically have your outer perimeter like you always do, but now you have a new inner perimeter and you're protecting your most vital data assets, servers, and you're effectively treating the folks that are on your network as untrusted entities.
The way I think about it is really simple, is you take the assets, an asset could be data, it can be a system, and you separate that from the users who are trying to gain access. It's all about not having the privilege of being able to go between assets and between data willy-nilly.
You want to get away from what I call the M&M model, which is your hard, crunchy shell and then your soft, gooey interior.
What's commonly overlooked, and it's becoming more and more of a problem, is things like IoT. We assume these devices they just hang on the network, they're very isolated, they do very minimalistic things, but they can be used as Trojan horses.
It's not so easy to just corral your stuff and throw it in the pen. You have to know what your stuff is. You're not just herding an entire herd of cattle. You're kind of hand selecting those cows one at a time and letting them through the chute to make sure that you've actually put in what you think is in and kept out what you think needs to be kept out. There's really three networks. There's the internet, there's the corporate network, and there's the guest network. And the guest network is allowed access to the internet, but not to the corporate. A true zero trust end goal is to get not the guest network eliminated to be more like the corporate network. It's to get the corporate network eliminated to be more like the guest network, right?
Once you authenticate my employee to my infrastructure for that initial service, if they want a separate service, they've got to authenticate again. There's never this approach to trust once, trust always. Zero trust is completely opposite to that.
If we're doing zero trust, aren't we removing some of the security incentives that IoT and some of these less secure devices have to get their stuff, make it patchable?
If you say that I'm going to use zero trust to make sure that that device will never compromise the infrastructure, I think you still have this obligation to make sure that your equipment is not hackable, so to speak, because not everyone's going to go to zero trust.
This going to what we were asking earlier, what do you think is a good starting point?
It starts with the way almost everything in InfoSec starts, which is asset management, right? It's all about what is and isn't on the network, what is and isn't deemed to be secure and ready.
What if the businesses would not be having much of the cost with them, and we would want to implement only one zero trust only on one of these domains? Which one would you think will help us more?
At the end of the day, I'm going to argue that really, no matter what you're doing in InfoSec, the intersection of data and entities, identities, is really the key crux of it. So I'm going to say protect your data first, your applications second, and your servers third.
I have seen evidence that attackers are starting to migrate their attacks to what they believe is the most vulnerable asset, and that's becoming the IoT.
It takes like a decade to make this kind of a change over time. And that's not to say we shouldn't start, and I'm all in philosophically, right? But zero trust, in my opinion, is a way of thinking about security.
What do you do with the things that literally need to operate in real time, and that, if you start adding, milliseconds of lag time, then you've got some serious problems?
You can't separate everything where every transaction needs to be authenticated. You have to have some level of IAM that says, for this session, I'm going to authenticate first, but it's going to stay up and available. It's not just about zero trust authenticating to an application and a service. There are different levels of data that might require additional authentication mechanisms to go through, or additional zero trust processes to make sure once you're in, it doesn't mean you get access to all the things that you're into.
I was thinking about this reverse. He was talking about risk-based authorization, but he's talking about risk-based authorization even after you've given the user permission. Like at each point, they're trying to get to different areas or levels in the space. Most
cyber attacks come from email. It's just the classic communication methodology that people use: social engineering, spamming, phishing, all that stuff. Is there a way that we could apply zero trust to email? How could we really fix this problem? Because it's such a huge challenge. But I think what we're saying now is if you extend that concept, then if you broaden it, you want to have that what I call the old M&M has to be the peanut M&M. It has to be crunchy on the inside too. So you really have to have all those steps in the middle. So I think AAA was kind of a very good early point, but it has to evolve.
This is what's really interesting about it. You call it zero trust, which sounds like, oh yeah, dude, we're totally hardcore about our security. We don't trust anybody. And it sounds much more secure, but there's actually a degree of openness to it, right? We talk about the 60, 70%. There's a reason most of the networks aren't zero trust yet. And that is you have to have an awful lot of trust in zero trust to implement zero trust.
All right. Dutch, I think, is coming on right now, and he's got a terrible idea.
My terrible idea is, why don't we create legislation that says you must either self-identify or have an auditor prove that you have a zero trust architecture?
I'm reading this book called Red Team. I just started. It's about, well, the whole philosophy and concept of red teaming. And one of the things that came up is that they'll create a task force where it says, argue the complete opposite. Give me a reason for the complete opposite.
You're here to challenge the status quo. So I'll try to do that. Getting security modernized is a thing for sure. I still can't get behind this.
I can.
So
I can get behind it. I think if you legislate it, bad idea. I don't think that is going to work. But what it will force is people to go down the path and get it done. I've run into some environments that is unbelievable how legacy they are. I don't want to advocate for legislation, but until you get to a forcing function, how do you get people to move? Because sometimes if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Mm-hmm.
If you've suddenly got a workforce that's all been punted to home, your architecture was either designed for that or not, and you're finding out the hard way what not looks like if it is a not. I think COVID-19 has basically shoved that down our throats. Whether we were embracing that one or not, we're embracing it now.
It's like a regulation coming down your throat, but this one didn't give you a heads-up timeline. It's just
you can't ever forget usability. I think it's a hurdle to overcome, but once you've got zero trust, the manageability and the usability variables, I think, pay off and make it worth doing.
I think we are experiencing a close to a zero trust environment right now because everyone's going home. They're working from their wherever they're located in their house, and they're accessing probably SaaS services and authenticating every time.
Goodbye.